There are things in a car that affect handling that I bet you hardly know about. The fact is, engines also have a balance factor. No, I'm not talking about what we've been talking about this whole time about engine placement. I'm talking about engine balance. In today's video, I'm going to explain how the 2JZ GTE is one of the greatest engines ever made. If you don't know the way an engine works, I'm going to explain it right now. If you already know the stuff, which you should, then you can just skip forward. There's a combustion housing that keeps energy trapped inside it, and there's a piston that absorbs the energy and translates it to the crankshaft through a piston rod from longitudinal motion to rotational motion, and from the crankshaft it makes your wheel spin. The engine has a housing and there's a piston in it. In motion, the piston goes down, sucking air and fuel into the housing. Then it compresses the air and fuel, creating heat energy caused by the friction it would possess by the compression. Then spark plugs fire, and the fuel gets ignited and combusts and expands, slamming the piston down. Then the air and fuel become exhaust. Air is good because it has oxygen, and oxygen is good for fire, so more combustion. There has to be a right ratio though. This stroke is called the power stroke. Then the piston rises up again and pushes the exhaust out of the engine. That is 4 strokes, and this is what rotates your wheels. Now there are obviously multiple pistons in engines to work together and keep up the momentum of the engine, and not just have it going slow until power stroke and then oh it's so fast and then compression slows it down again. So there are multiple pistons to keep the engine speed smooth and make more power, and every single piston is connected to a rod that's connected to a pin that's connected to the crankshaft. Now an engine, like I said, also has a balance factor. I'm going to explain what's balance and why the 2JZ is so good. First of all, primary balance. It works like this. A piston stroking has inertia. In order to balance out the inertia so the piston doesn't shoot out of the top of the engine, it's obviously connected to the crankshaft with crank pins. And there are crankshaft counterweights to balance it out. Except when the piston rod is diagonal, then the counterweight is useless. It actually unbalances the engine with its inertia. It's only helpful when the piston is at top dead center or bottom dead center. But there are also other pistons that carry their own inertia. And when the inertia of one piston is traveling at a distance offset from the other piston, but still connected to the same crankshaft, their inertia acts on different ends of the engine. So if the piston's crank pins are at different places on the crankshaft and set at different angles, their inertial force will act on the opposing parts of the engine at different times. This causes a great inertial imbalance. Another name for it is a rocking couple, but the right technical name is primary imbalance, but it's boring, so I'm gonna call it a rocking couple. Okay, the rocking couple causes great vibration, wears out engine mounts. It's just less healthy, the whole engine. It lowers engine revs, it drops efficiency. There's nothing good about this. In order to balance out this great imbalance, there must be a piston on the opposite side going in the same direction of the piston on power stroke. In this way, the combustion force that pushes the piston down is present on both sides of the engine. The pistons are balancing each other out. To explain secondary balance and imbalance, I need to explain piston speed. You see, a piston moves up and down and a crankshaft rotates, but there needs to be something that takes the energy that the piston has absorbed and translates it from a reciprocating force to a rotational force. That little thingy that translates the force of the piston to the crankshaft so that the crankshaft can spin your wheels is called a rod. It's connected to the piston by a pin, and it's also connected to the crankshaft by another pin. So the rod has 2 ways it's moving. The top pin is just going up and down, while the bottom pin is going around and around. You see, when it's at that angle, or there's a little bit of momentum pushing in that direction, any force applied to the piston is going to force the rod to rotate the crankshaft. But there's a problem. When the piston is taking its downstroke, the top pin, as I said, it stays going up and down, so it's just going lower. But the bottom pin is connected to the crankshaft. So what this does is turn the rod diagonal. The rod is getting shorter because it's getting diagonal. And as the rod is getting shorter, the piston is getting pulled down even faster. Then when it turns from diagonal back to vertical, the rod gets longer. So yes, the piston is getting pulled by the rotation of the crankshaft, but also it's getting pushed up by the extending rod. So the piston speed is slowed down. Top half of a revolution is faster, while bottom half of a revolution is slower. This creates, yes, you guessed it, a massive imbalance. And the bigger the stroke, the bigger the secondary imbalance. A way to balance it out, while there's a piston on the momentous, fast or slow motion, there must be others balancing out its inertial force of speed changing moments, sitting at other parts of their strokes. So basically your engine mustn't be filled with a whole lot of pistons going at the same rate, going constantly fast motion at the same time and slow motion at the same time. Wow. So primary balance tells me that all the pistons must sort of go at the same rate, while secondary balance tells me the total opposite. Then how must I balance my engine? Well, slow thinker, I'm going to be talking about one great engine that managed just to do that. And it's called the 2JZ GTE. It is a 2.6 liter inline 6 engine. Inline 6s are sweet, man. I'm going to explain how it's perfectly balanced. First of all, the 2JZ GTE has perfect primary balance, as piston 1 and 6 are pinned at the same angle on the crankshaft, the same for 2 and 5, and the same for 3 and 4. So it's perfectly primary balanced. Secondary balance, you guessed it. There's perfect secondary balance. It's perfect there too, as there are always pistons at different speeds cancelling out each other's speed. The other really cool thing about the 2JZ, there is 60 degrees of power stroke overlap. This means for 60 degrees of a single revolution, which is 180 degrees, there are 2 power strokes happening. This makes the engine super smooth. It's crazy how smooth it is. This revs up to 9,000 RPM. That's the other thing about perfectly balanced engines. They can rev higher. Why? Because they are balanced. And when your engine is balanced, it's healthier. So the 2JZ is perfectly balanced, but it also has a lot more that makes it one of the most capable engines in the world. And it is the strength and engineering. The 2JZ GTE has a closed deck cast iron engine block, which is very strong, since iron is more than double the strength of aluminium. Not aluminum. Yes, you heard me right. It's aluminium, not aluminum. Go get a room. This engine is extremely beefed up, not just because it's closed deck. There's a lot of reinforcements. There are big oil return holes for cooling efficiency at high end. These oil return holes create huge reinforcement ribs along the engine, on the engine. But the return holes are on the outside of the boundary of the block, between each cylinder. They did not want to compromise on the meat of the engine. That was what's keeping it strong. These reinforcements made it so strong, and the oil return holes prevent knock. There's also a highly reinforced girdle for extra strength and stiffness just between the engine block and the sump. There's a multi-layer steel head gasket, forged steel, fully counterweighted, beefed up crankshaft with huge journals, forged connecting rods. Pistons are high pressure cast hyper-eutectic, and they have coatings of friction reduction and heat reflection. This all enhances power potential. What else makes this engine less prone to knock is the internal oil gallery with oil squirters. It directly cools the piston from the inside, flowing through its crown. And the Supra Mark IV has sequential twin turbos that are said to be super linear. All this engineering, all the beefing up and reinforcing allows you to tune the engine up to 800 horsepower with stock components. That is more than a 911 992 Turbo S. And you see, the thing is, the Supra Mark IV was from the 90s, not from 2022. The only reason that a Supra is only 320 horsepower, or said to be 280 horsepower, is because of that dumb Japanese gentleman's agreement. I'm not going to explain that gentleman's agreement on this video. Go find someone else who can explain it for you. And the Supra doesn't only have a perfect engine. The Supra was made with GT racing DNA. Yes, it is a heavy Grand Tourer, but the base is pure race car, and the handling is amazing. I might get to it in a future video.
どうも、ショップリドックス代表、折戸学です。550馬力以上、トルクは65キロ以上。で、足回りとかそういうのにこだわってまして、僕の中ではですね、一応 GT 選手権の練習用車、そんなイメージで作ってみました。スープル、よろしく。
よし。
気をつけてください。
そんな危ないの？
いや、普通に乗れば大丈夫ですけど。
あははは、いきなり踏んじゃってます、この人。早っ。
The 2.6-liter 2JZ GTE engine sits at the front of the car. It's a front engine car, but the engine is about 55% behind the front axle and about 45% over the front axle. Whereas a Skyline GTR that also has a sweet engine that I haven't mentioned much, that engine sits about 80% in front of the front axle. The car has a 4-wheel double wishbone suspension system. Ultimate grip, variable camber, that's what that is. It gives it such sweet handling. I mean, yes, you can argue it's not front mid-engine like an S2000, but come on, this is an amazing handling car. This specific Supra you're seeing being driven by the greatest trio of all time. This is Max Orido's personal Supra. It's the Redox Supra. Redox is his personal tuning company. He's made body kits and all. This specific Supra is tuned up to 600 horsepower. Now the Nissan Skyline GTR's engine is actually the one I think I prefer. It's very much like the 2JZ. It's even the same displacement. It's 2.6 liters. Most of all, it's called the RB26. It has individual throttle bodies. It also has turbos. It's also beefed up like hell. The max power it can put out on stock components is around 600 to 650 horsepower. And the Nissan Skyline GTR is another living legend to be respected greatly. This video shows the MCR Skyline GTR.
さあ、600馬力 GTR の実力を見せてもらいましょう。こいつも速っ。
おお、回答性いいよこれ。おお、すげえいい。
車重は 1.5 トンの超重量級ながらドリドリの感触は良さそう。区間タイムはどうか。
頭の入りもすごくいい。
なんとこれまで最速の FD に肉薄する13秒台に突入。そして圧巻が高速セクション。すんごいスピードいきながら安定した足で車内は至って穏やか。
収まり。
続いてはスープラオーナーのオリダーがチェック。
すげえいい。この限界を超えるとオーバーじゃなくてアンダーが出るってところがすごいいいね。あ、これがもう限界なんだなってのはすぐ分かるもんね。
この手の車には乗り慣れている谷口も峠でこの馬力は初めてか。谷口が押しているのは瞬間650馬力を発生するスクランブルブーストだ。
このスクランブルボタンってのがまたいいね。
レースで勝つために作られた GTR の潜在能力はやはり桁違い。このステージでも持ち味を十分に発揮。
These engines have something in common, and that's balance. Welcome to the edition on engines in the Balance series. The thing that had the biggest part to play in making the Supra such a dangerous car with such a strong aura is the engine. The strength, health and ease the engine had to go up in power to any number you give it. After 800 horsepower, just do a little few upgrades here and there, forge the pistons, a few little changes, tunes, and you'll have 1200 horsepower. Bunk it up to 2000 horsepower. And this is why I don't care what supercar you're in. When you see a Supra alongside of you without a wing and a computer on the other seat, don't even try to race it. Do not rev your engine past 2000 RPM. Make a U-turn and crawl back home. No wonder the Supra has such an aura. It is the car that appeared to be just a cheap coupe, but was not known to be the monster it is until the first person tuned it up. Its aura and legend is gonna live on for decades. Thanks for watching.